Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Curious John. My apologies for not providing a podcast last week. A little busy, and as I've mentioned a million times, it bugs me not to do so. Also because this is stupid, but I'll fill you in. It throws off my Instagram posts. So my Instagram posts a lot of the time are project podcast until I take on another thing that will break up the routine, right? So because I didn't have a podcast this week, I didn't intentionally post a project update picture thing. So whatever, it is what it is. Can't do anything about it. So this week's podcast, I'm going to keep it kind of short and tight, only because, as mentioned a million times on this podcast, there are times where I do feel like I'm given like little gifts, and they're so small in nature that it's hard to really see them sometimes. A lot of it is either perspective or idea shifting kind of thoughts, gifts, if you will. I just call them all gifts as a group. But the other day, I was grocery shopping, and I'm a creature of habit. I have a routine. I stick to my routines. Routines, for me, give me a certain level of stability. They give me a certain level of consistency in the way that gives me predictability and allows me to get things done, whether that's work, whether that's projects, whether that's all the extra stuff I'm doing in addition to those two things. Having a certain level of routine and stability allows me to be able to really gauge my time and split it accordingly, so that I know that when I have to try to get X things done by X time, I can do that. And so that is the bright side of routine. We've touched upon this, I believe, on a previous podcast. But every once in a while, it is good to break the routine. And in that, you're not just focused on the next task and the next task. I've mentioned on a previous podcast about productivity and how to increase that by lists and such. And the downside of that, I think I've discussed the downside, but I can't remember, too many podcasts now. The downside of that is that you can get into a zone of just go, and easily either not take time to unwind, or you're going through life so quickly that you don't have time to smell the roses, as the saying goes. And sometimes, every once in a while, you come across a situation where you're kind of given that gift, right? It's very rare for me because, once again, the last probably near year, in fact, I've mentioned last podcast, go catch up if you haven't, that all these extracurriculars I'm taking on now, that's only the last 9 months. I mean, the last 3 years have been nonstop for me. No vacations. I mean, maybe a day or two time off here or there, but it's literally like working out. Weekends were all filled with projects. I mean, constant, nonstop, to the point where it's been like this for a very long time. So, why did I say that? I don't know. Came to mind. I digress. So I go back to, I was going grocery shopping, and for some reason, my grocery store changed up their aisles. So, being a creature of habit, as I've mentioned, I'm used to knowing what lanes I'm going to go to, especially when I'm food prepping for like weight loss, right? Right now, I'm not necessarily food prepping for weight loss. I'm food prepping for just life, because I've been doing it for over a decade or almost two now. So I know what I'm getting, and it's fairly consistent, and I can basically plan my trip along the grocery store in a way that is incredibly efficient to save the most time and allow me to do more things in a day. But because the store has now been reorganized, I had to go and try to find where everything was in a kind of different way. You go to one aisle and there's a paper hanging there saying, oh, this stuff has been relocated to aisle 5. And then you're like, all right, well, I got to get this from aisle 3. Let me go get that. And then I'll go to aisle 5. I just continue to progressively move down the aisle till I get to the very end, and then I go check out. So I go and get some stuff. It throws me off of the routine a little bit. So eventually I have to find myself in a further aisle. I'm like, well, it sparked my curiosity a little bit. And I went down an aisle where I'm like, well, where did they put in this aisle now? So, which is hilarious because I don't often allow myself to do that. Like, oftentimes, especially if I'm buying things that are utilitarian in a way, like, this is probably more than you folks want to know about me, but I'm going to share because we're in a sharing mood. I hate buying clothes. I hate buying clothes probably more than I hate doing like yard work, which I hate doing yard work for the record. I hate buying clothes. It's one of my least favorite things. If I could just order the same thing over and over and just wear the same look every single day, I would, just because it's easy. Now I understand why artists, by the way, wear just like black shirts and like pants or whatever, and they wear the same exact look every single day. They just buy like a bulk of it. But back to the topic. I hate buying clothes. So, damn, why did I get on the clothes topic? See, I'm getting tired, folks. I need more coffee. So, back to my story. I sparked my interest, and so I don't often, that's what it was. I don't often go and just peruse the aisles. It's often efficiency. I go and grab my stuff, I get out and I go, as I talked about earlier. And so this time I went down the aisle, and it's, how grocery stores, depending on which ones you go to, right? Like dedicated grocery stores. Not if you go to like a Walmart, where Walmart has everything. You can go buy a TV and then also buy produce. I'm talking about dedicated grocery stores where it's mostly groceries, and then every once in a while they have like an aisle of miscellaneouses. They have like the car oil if you need it or something, or like all the different like laundry detergent stuff, or they have like home goods where it's like, oh, here's a sewing kit in case you needed to like sew something last minute, and this is the closest store to you. And then they also had the school supplies, right? The pens, the pencils, the notebooks, all that stuff. So I found myself in that aisle, and because I don't often give myself enough time to just take a breath and look around, it's odd for me to say that I did this for once. And once again, gifts, right? I can't say why I did it. Traditionally, what I would have done is just run through, grab my stuff, let's go, let's check out, let's go to the next thing. But this time, for some reason, I took a different path. And that path might have been a direct result of the store reorganizing, which made me break up the routine. That is something I'll have to analyze a little bit more. But let's get back on topic. Because I had to go through the stationery aisle, I found myself looking through all the little stationery things, because you always wonder, like, why does a store choose to carry some things but not others? And then as I was looking at the little what are they called? The mechanical pencils. As I look at the mechanical pencils, I had like a very brief, like glimpse in my childhood. And it reminded me of like when I was very, very young wanting a mechanical pencil. So I've never alluded to this, I've never talked about this, but I grew up like with very humble beginnings. My family was very, very, very like broke. We didn't have a lot. And when my mom and my stepdad, like we were there, I was very young and they were raising me, it was like we were very, very tight. And this is the reason why I'm going to bring this up. I remember when I was very young, like I wanted a mechanical pencil so badly because I thought they were so cool in comparison to regular pencils, right? There was something about it. And you got to remember, like some of you listening to this grew up with tech. I didn't grow up with tech. I was that generation that went from like analog stuff to like basic computers. And then eventually like home computers were a huge thing. And then we're where we are now. But a mechanical pencil to me, especially from my very like poor beginnings, was huge. And I remember talking to my mom and like alluding to the fact that I wanted a mechanical pencil, and her just like looking at me say like, no, we're not gonna get you that, I can't afford it, kind of thing. And that wasn't a parent like telling a kid, no, you can't have it. It was like a legitimate like, we can't afford it kind of thing, right? You're trying to be tight on money to make better money decisions. And it made me really it made that pop into my head, because now as I sit here with like a nice phone, and I sit here with like a tablet, and I'm looking at my screen, my television on my wall right now, like that perspective was lost over time. That perspective of like being that little kid and wanting that mechanical pencil, not being able to have it, that was lost. And as I sat there and I like stared at it, it clicked only because I found myself in that aisle. I don't often go down that aisle, if you could tell. It only clicked because I went down that aisle. And that aisle reminded me of like all the mixture of things that are in that aisle that put me back in that spot as a kid that wanted it. And it's an interesting mindset to go from where you are now to where I am now to where that kid was then. And knowing that if I wanted to, I could go and buy that mechanical pencil for $3. Or the pack of 2 or whatever they are. I can go and buy that now for $3 and it wouldn't really be big deal. But back then it was. And I guess the thought I would give you for this week, that way we don't overdo this one because I like keeping these short. The thought I would have for you is life is about balance. I tell you guys all the time that if I struggle with one thing in life, it's about balance because I'm too focused on one point at times. And if I had to struggle with things, it's balance. And when I'm telling you that I go and do things and I routinely do things to increase productivity, efficiencies, because I've got so much going on, and I focus on that so much, it's hard to bring balance back in and have the ability to just sometimes take a breath and break up the routine in order for your mind to re-spark some memories. Because what essentially happened here was my mind was on productivity. My mind was on focusing on getting things done and doing things. And as I was forced to change the productivity by going through a different aisle because of the reorganization of the grocery store, forced me to go to a different aisle, which forced me to slow down a little bit, which forced me to let my brain, the back end of my brain, bring up a memory that I had probably not thought about in over 20 years. And it brought back those feelings. It brought back it brought back who I was at that point. It brought back that small kid, but it also reminded me of like humble beginnings. And it brought back a little level of perspective, and it gave me an idea of like thankfulness of the progress that I've definitely made from being that kid and where I am now. And I think that only happens if every once in a while you do allow yourself to break up the routine. And you do allow yourself a little bit of breathing. And while it's great to be successful and productive in life, you have to allow yourself to enjoy those moments. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's today's podcast. I allude to this gift thing a lot, but it is fascinating because if it wasn't for the idea that these things are kind of sometimes gifted to me, I'd be without podcasts sometimes. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. I always tell you, this is just kind of nice little prompts for you to think about things, get a little bit of perspective on life, and maybe give you a little bit of mental gymnastics to think about on your drives to work or whatnot. All I ask, as always, if you enjoy this, if you think this is worthwhile, something that friends, family would enjoy, share the podcast. It's free. I am LifeGeneralist, and this has been Curious John.